There's a lot of misinformation out there with regard to tariffs, with regard to immigration and border security, with regard to tax policy. You need a good, competent, clear-speaking spokesperson from the White House to cut through all of the lies from the fake news. And this White House has plenty of players in that regard. Certainly Caroline Leavitt, the spokesperson for the White House. But if you think about it, almost every cabinet secretary has exemplar media skills. And I want to draw your attention to one of our favorites. He's not your typical, news on camera personality. He's got some quirks, but he's great because he doesn't care what the media thinks about him. He's the Deputy Chief of Staff of the White House. He's Stephen Miller. And he has forgotten more about border security and immigration policies than you're ever going to know. And I'm sure you've seen headlines out there about a Supreme Court ruling that demanded that the Trump White House bring back that Maryland father, the one with MS-13 tattoos and associated with MS-13 criminal gang members the time he was in this country illegally. Yeah, that guy. He's just a Maryland father, just like the rest of you. And I'm sure you saw that the Supreme Court unanimously demanded that the Trump White House return him from the El Salvadoran jail that he's currently in. The problem is that's not true. The Supreme Court did not say that, but that didn't stop every network all weekend long from repeating that lie. So Stephen Miller confronted the press this morning in the front driveway of 1600 Pennsylvania, and I want you to watch.
Hey, I'm good, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Who wants to go first?
I'll ask, do you plan on ramping up does the administration plan on ramping up deportations to El Salvador? And how many people do you want El Salvador to take from the United States?
Well, as an example, there are thousands of either trained Nicaragua members left in this country or their affiliates and associates. So obviously some portion of those will be going to El Salvador as part of our effort to eradicate this foreign terrorist organization from the United States. But there's no upper limit to the agreement. We're going to continue to send foreign terrorist aliens to El Salvador as well as to many other countries. I think you were first, I think.
Is the president asking President Bukele today to send Mr. Rodrigo Garcia back to the U.S.?
Well, again, to be very clear about this, the Supreme Court ruled that the district court cannot, obviously, compel us to conduct diplomacy or foreign policy with another nation. And so they overturned the district court order. And they said very clearly that the district court, it was actually a unanimous ruling, overreached in that ruling. I'm not going to reveal any head of state conversations or conversations at the State Department or the lower level. But the important point that we all agree on is that he's an El Salvadorian. That is his country of nativity and citizenship. He is an illegal alien in the United States. He has no lawful right to be here. He was issued a final order of removal from this country. And so it's up to El Salvador and to the government and the people of El Salvador what the fate of their own citizens is. We can't extradite citizens of foreign countries to our country over the objection of those countries. Obviously, to do that would be a monstrous violation of international law. We can't go into other countries and kidnap their citizens and then take them back into our country. That's up to El Salvador and their own.
All right, so let me just pause there real fast. By the way, a lot of the background here in terms of why these questions are coming up today, other than just the Supreme Court ruling that came down last week and all of the misinformation, but the president of El Salvador, President Bukele, is actually in Washington, D.C. and will be meeting with the president all day today. So they're saying, well, are you going to tell him to return this guy to the United States? I just want to reiterate, he is a citizen of El Salvador. He is currently in El Salvador. As Miller just pointed out, who the hell are we to tell the president of a foreign nation that he must send one of his citizens back to this country where he has no legal status? He was in this country illegally. It's again, I feel like I'm in like fantasy land sometimes, or through the looking glass when you hear about how the media is covering this story, or better yet, not covering this story, at least not covering the facts of this story. Again, the language that was in the Supreme Court ruling specifically told the lower court that they can't tell the White House or the executive branch how to conduct any diplomacy or any communications with a foreign country having to do with a foreign national, and can't compel them to remit or exclude anybody from coming into the country. That's not the purview of the federal court system. What they said was that because the administration admitted that this person had been, through an administrative error, included in this group of Venezuelans that went down to El Salvador, that they should facilitate his removal from the prison. That's it. Facilitate the removal from the prison. And I'm sure when the president is meeting with Bukele today, I want to say ukulele. I don't know why, because it sounds like that. When he meets with Bukele today, he says, oh, by the way, that guy that's your Salvadoran citizen who's got all the gang tattoos and claims he's not in a gang, apparently he's in the prison there. If you wouldn't mind, why don't you release him from the prison until he can be tried in your courts? There. Simple. Done. But it didn't end, because the media is sure that they've got the facts on their side, when in fact they have no facts on their side. And Miller patiently educates them.
But it's their own citizen, right? So remember, this whole entire conversation has been wrong from the beginning, because nobody was mistakenly deported anywhere. That's like the big fact that most of you have gotten wrong. No one was mistakenly sent anywhere. The only mistake that was made is a lawyer put an incorrect line in a legal filing, and they've since been relieved of duty. He is El Salvadorian. He is an illegal alien. He was deported to El Salvador. I would welcome anyone here to tell me what country they think we should be sending El Salvadorian illegal aliens to.
Didn't a judge order that he not be deported to El Salvador 5 years ago?
So what you're referring to is an immigration judge. So that's Article 2, not Article 3. So there was no Article 3 restraint on his removal. A withholding order or a cancellation of removal order, first of all, as I'm sure you know, does not eliminate the deportation order, right? We all agree on that. So his status was, he's an illegal alien who's been ordered deported, which means he can be indefinitely detained and removed to any other country in the world, right?
All right, in case you missed that, because Miller is incredibly smart, an Article 2 judge is an administrative judge that works within within the executive branch of government. It's not Article 3, which is the judicial branch, Supreme Court, right? So what happens is, whether it's the EPA or whether it's the Department of Labor or whether in this case it's the Department of Homeland Security, you have these judges, and these judges adjudicate administrative issues within the executive branch if there is a legal conflict. Now, everybody has a right to appeal those things and actually utilize the Article 3, which is the third branch of government, court system to try to, defend your constitutional rights. But of course, understand this guy doesn't have any rights of a citizen because he's in the country illegally. So 99 out of 100 times, if somebody is ordered ripe for deportation from an Article 2 administrative judge within the Department of Homeland Security, they're out of here. They're donezo. They're gone. The federal court system is not going to wade into that kind of thing because it's not their jurisdiction, because the executive branch has the right to adjudicate these things on their own. That's what Miller is explaining here. And I do love that he says to these reporters with their really fancy journalism degrees from Northwestern University, where they learn to ignore Antifa and assassination attempts on Donald Trump, that, of course, you know that already, which they don't know that already. They barely got through Schoolhouse Rock. But let's get back to Miller.
Right, he could be sent to literally any country on the face of the earth. But the preference, in general matter, is to deport someone to their home country, right? In this case, El Salvador. Because he is a member of a foreign terrorist organization, withholding orders don't apply to FTOs for obvious reasons. So if you had an illegal alien, say from Syria, who's a member of ISIS, they can't apply for withholding of removal. So that principle applies here. Furthermore, the gang that he said was going to persecute him, so this theory that he's an MS-13 and there's this rival gang, the 18th Street Gang, doesn't exist anymore in El Salvador. So the entire concept is false. But again,
He's going to repeat things here for a second because the media doesn't get it, but I hope you caught that because you're hearing misinformation all over the place. Well, 5 years ago, a judge said that you can't remove him because he's in fear for his life back to that country. All right, so now people assume that that's some sort of asylum claim because he fears for his life from the government of the country he's being sent to, like he's some sort of political dissident. No, he's a gang member. And he was afraid that if he went back to the mean streets of El Salvador, he'd be hunted down by the rival gang member. Now, that may be a legitimate fear, or it was 5 years ago, but that ain't our problem. I'm sorry, our asylum system in the United States of America is not set up to protect people from a rival gang. Are you kidding me? That's not legit. And whether a judge was hoodwinked by that or not is a dead matter at this point, as Miller just laid out, because that gang that he was afraid of if he went back to El Salvador doesn't exist anymore. So he doesn't have a legitimate fear. He wants to stay in America with all his other MS-13 buddies so he can chop up innocent people with machetes and leave their bodies to rot in a creek near Washington, D.C. and Fairfax Park, as happens often in this region, and they can continue to stay on top of their huge drug ring that's here. That's why they're here. Not because they're fleeing torment in their own country. It's because they come here to set up a larger gang enterprise. And that's what this guy is accused of doing in the first place. And bottom line is, he's not a citizen. He came here illegally. And if he even consorts with criminal gang members, we have the right to deport him. You need to, even if you're a legal resident in this country with a legal green card, you are under conditions to stay. We can send you back home anytime we want if you break the rules of the guest residency that we have offered you. You're not a citizen. So I just want to make sure you got that, because this is misinformation that you're hearing all over the place. Oh, a judge granted him the chance to stay here because he's afraid he'd get killed. Not from the government, from a rival gang that no longer exists. Buddy, go home. Bye-bye.
When the media talks about the idea that there was a mistaken removal, it implies to, I think, a normal listener, the wrong person was sent somewhere. He's an illegal alien from El Salvador. Where was he sent? To El Salvador. Where does he belong? In El Salvador. He belongs.
Sending someone home and sending them into a prison that they can remove.
It is up to El Salvador how to handle the process for their own citizens. Again, what you seem to be asking us to do is to change the government and the laws of El Salvador. So if we deport somebody back to, for example, Syria, should we be closely involved on a day-to-day basis with the Syrian government, detailing that person's life and future? If we deport, say, 100,000 people back to Haiti, should we open a case file on each of those 100,000 people and ask every day, what's their housing situation? What's their healthcare situation? What might they need? What might they want? Once someone's out of our country, that becomes the problem of their host country, not our country. These people chose to invade us. So there's a lot of concern from the corporate media about the invaders, but they chose to invade us. It's our responsibility to return them back to where they came from, or another country willing to take them.
Stephen, is the president going to ask for him to be returned to the United States or not? Like, yes or no?
So first of all, it's not a question for me to answer, but I think that the assumption that underlies the question is what needs to be corrected, which is that there was no mistake that was made. He was sent. So what? Let me ask you, what do you think would happen to him if he came back to this country? As your understanding of immigration laws, what do you think would happen?
But I'm just asking.
No, it's important to know. You're asking a lot of questions. You are all asking a lot of questions about this, and you all seem to care about it a lot. So let's see if any of you have researched anything about this issue at all. Can anyone here tell me what would happen to the illegal alien from El Salvador if he came back to the United States? Does anyone here know? Does anyone want to guess? Any of you?
He could be with his family.
What does any of you know the answer to the question? Legally, what would happen if he came back here? Does any of you know? Any of you?
You've
been writing. I'm talking now. You need to stop. I'm talking now. Does any of you?
Why was it unanimous?
You're done. Does any of you know the answer to the question? Does any of you? You've been talking about it for days. He would be arrested.
Okay.
He'd be put in confinement. He would be deported the second time to El Salvador again, because there's no withholding order for an alien who's a member of a foreign terrorist organization, number one. Number two is the gang that he's a member of doesn't exist in El Salvador anymore. So what you're asking for is to be deported twice. But additionally, if we chose to just pretend that the withholding order was real, he would be deported to a different country. So, for example, he could be deported to Egypt. So I'm just trying to understand, is it your view, in other words, you have to find a country that would be willing to take a MS-13 member from El Salvador. So I'm trying to understand from you all is, so if he came back and under our laws, he was then deported to Egypt or to Somalia, would you then be saying, great, I'm so glad that you deported him to another country? Is that what you'd all be saying? Like, do you understand our immigration laws at all? But the premise of your question, the gentlemen, the return, guys, do you know the difference between a deportation order and a withholding order? Do you know the difference? Any of you, please. Do you?
Well, we're not in the government.
But you couldn't even spend 72 hours over the weekend learning the distinction, even though you've been writing and talking about it this whole time. Just raise your hand. Does any of you know the difference between a deportation order and a withholding order?
How do you know that he's a member of MS-13? The White House has repeatedly said according to intelligence.
According to our government and his government. In other words, his government has confirmed based on their own intelligence that he's a member of MS-13. First of all, do you dispute that he's an illegal alien? Do you dispute that he's an illegal alien?
No.
Okay. And do you dispute that as an illegal alien, we have the right to deport him? And he went through the legal process. So I want to be very okay. What I'm getting from this conversation, which is educational for me, is that not one person in the media knows the difference between a deportation order and a withholding order. Is that a fair statement? You're learning about this all for the first time right now? I guess so. Okay. So the deportation order means the judge has said he must be deported from the country. He has no right to remain here any longer. He must be removed from the country. So his only options are to be deported to his home country or another country. That's it. There's no other option. He doesn't get to stay here. He doesn't get to live here. He has no future here. He has no right to be here. He's an illegal alien. So when you keep saying return, because you've been spun up by the open borders advocates, you all seem to be operating under the illusion that he would be able to come to the United States and just continue to live here illegally. That's not an option available to him. His only choices in life are to live in El Salvador or to live in another country. That's it. There's no other option, legally or otherwise, because he came to our country illegally. Do you understand that?
Can I ask as a matter?
No, they do not understand that. They don't understand that in any way whatsoever. God, that was glorious. But what was your favorite part, by the way? I'd love for you to let us know in the chat or in the comments. In fact, I know you like this video, so where's our likes? Let's get the thumbs up going because we're a little, it's Monday morning. You guys are a little sluggish today. That was brilliant. My favorite part personally was when he started literally conducting a class and started asking, okay, could I see a show of hands here? Who knows the difference between a deportation order and a withholding order? Anybody? Anyone? Yes? No? Maybe? God, that's good. Okay, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you know the difference. Yet you've all been talking about it all weekend long, and you didn't bother to just go ask Grok. Go do a quick chat GPT. They write half your scripts anyway. You've already got your gold premium account with ChatGPT. Might as well just ask them one more question. What's the difference between a deportation order? Deportation order, by the way, is called a removal order, a legal directive. Says get this guy out of the country. That's what this guy is. I do like. Part of me wishes that the Trump administration would say, okay, everybody, you will have it your way. And get this guy, ask Bukele from El Salvador, would you return him to us, please? And get him right in the Miami airport, immediately arrest him with all the cameras watching, put him right into a withholding cell, bring in an immigration judge right there at the airport, hear the hearing, have him deported, and then send him to Gaza. Here, we're going to deport him now, and I know you don't want him to go to El Salvador because he's afraid he's going to get killed by a criminal gang that doesn't exist anymore. So you're going to have it your way, everybody. We're sending him to Gaza. Happy now? There. Got what you wanted. Listen, I understand these are confusing times for people as they actually see our immigration laws enforced and our borders secured again. And you're confused. You don't understand what this looks like. I've been saying this since the beginning of the videos showing Tom Homan and Kristi Noem going out there and bagging the bad guy in the middle of, lower east side of Manhattan, and they get deported. And when you saw the videos of the people on the planes going into the jail in El Salvador, It's not about that guy they caught on the streets of Manhattan, and it's not about the plane load of criminal thug terrorists that they sent out to El Salvador. It's about everybody who's here right now. It's about everybody else saying, my God, they mean it this time. And I have two choices. Well, I have three choices. My first choice is I can leave, go back home, take whatever money I've got with me that I've been able to earn, and start the process again to try to come back to America legally. Or I can wait for them to catch me and I leave and I never get to come back legally and I don't get any of the money. In fact, they're going to fine me and send me to a jail. Or third, I can try to hide. I can hide and pretend none of this is happening and live in the shadows, as we've been hearing for decades about the illegal immigrants in this country. And it may be weird for you to see our laws being enforced this way. It may be weird for you to see an administration with a robust immigration policy and border security policy exercising it in public so the world can see that we mean business. I know that you're not used to that. Honestly, we haven't seen it since the Eisenhower administration, which means we have never seen it at all in our lifetimes, most of us. But let's just be clear on what's going on here. For the past 4 years, the Biden administration with Kamala Harris and Alejandro Mayorkas let every type of criminal and terrorist into this country without any kind of check. It was a free-for-all. The border was wide open. Chaos ensued and continues to reign in many of the neighborhoods where these illegal immigrants wreak their terror right now. You don't flip that overnight. And as you start rounding people up and sending them out by the thousands and tens of thousands, there may be one or two people who, yes, are in the country illegally, but maybe they didn't deserve to be sent out. Yeah, that might happen. You know why? Because they were let in the first place. That's what happens when you're trying to clean up a completely, totally chaotic mess that was inflicted on this peaceful nation during the Biden administration. I'm angry about it too. You have every right to be. But don't be angry at the people who are trying to clean up the mess. Be angry at the people who made the mess. And always remember what they've done to this country. And for everyone else in this country illegally who is now terrified at this, who's like, oh my gosh, I could be next. My answer to you is yes. That's right. You could be next. So contact the federal government, register with them through the app, let them know who you are, let them know where you are, let them know that you're living a clean, legal life, let them know that you're checking in, that you're not consorting with terrorists or gang members, and you're doing your best to keep your nose clean and eventually go through the process legally, even if that means going back to your home country. For the most part, you're probably not going to be bothered until all of the thugs are taken care of. But at some point, the federal government is, in fact, going to knock on your door and say, okay, you broke our laws. You're in this country illegally. You're working in this country illegally. You continue to remain in this country illegally. It's time for you to take responsibility for your actions and clean up this mess. That's going to happen because that's what grown-up countries do. And, well, the grown-ups are back in